guys know Josh Apple? I'm sure most of you know Josh. Give him a hand. And I'll just say that it's been a tremendous blessing for me to watch the journey and to be a part of the journey before the military, through the military. And we were all saying hallelujah when the military time was over. And we're just grateful that the legacy that he has with his father and his mother and now his children. And he's the tip of the top. I tell people all the time, if you want to meet the tip of the top, Josh Apple's the guy. That's how I feel. And so bless us tonight. We love you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks, guys. PC's really covering for me because I texted him earlier today. I was like, man, I've tried to whittle this down as best as I possibly could, but 30 minutes? He said, don't worry, send it. So it's good to be here with you guys. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to cry so many times during this because it's just been an incredible journey. People use the word being humbled a lot. I don't think there's anything more humbling than God directly intervening in your life over and over and just doing things that there's no way you could do on your own. So I appreciate you guys having me. I'm glad that I get to do this here at Upward Church Home. We've been here since the inception of Upward. Started in, I think, a living room and then middle school library. So it's pretty amazing to see what it's become today, but I'm not surprised at all. It's always been an awesome place. PC's always been the guy to follow. So it's just good to be here with you. Well, my name's Josh Apple, for those of you who don't know me. Grew up kind of in between Dallas and Pensacola. My dad was a general manager for Sam's and Walmart when Sam Walton was alive. Got transferred back and forth to Pensacola quite a few times. And after Sam Walton died, he decided, I want to set up roots in Pensacola. And so he opened up his own business in Pensacola off Scenic Highway called the Apple Market, which I'm sure you guys will know about. Prayer team to my left, your right, for anybody that shops at Publix after the service. I'm just kidding. I got an amen out of that. But why I'm here today, it's so interesting. Over the last couple of weeks, hearing these messages about divine providence, divine interactions, and I'm going to add divine interventions later on in my story, was the whole time I was sitting there listening to PC talk, I'm like, he's talking about me. These are things that I went through, all of these. Should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I step out in faith and make this happen? And then confirmation after confirmation of what I was supposed to be doing, basically transitioning from working at a grocery store into a career in special operations. And so I was just sitting there the whole time thinking, man, I could tell this story. I could testify to this. And when you know it, PC caught me one Sunday morning and was like, hey, could you tell that story in 2 minutes? I said, probably not. And he goes, what about 20 minutes? I said, I'll try and make that happen. So here I am, and I'm excited to share this story with you guys. My goal, what I hope you can take away from this today, is that I am a personal testament to if God says go, move, or do, that you can trust it. And I don't know how to say it any more simply than that. It's going to be crazy. I can almost guarantee that, and it's not going to happen in the way you expect. But I can personally testify to the fact that I was told to go and to do something, things way outside of my scope of who I thought I could be, and was successful at it. Now with that, I got to throw in a caveat to this. I think a lot of time God works like Mr. Miyagi. Anybody who's seen the original Karate Kid, the only Karate Kid? So I see a few head nods. So this is a principle my dad taught me growing up. You know, you think of the story of the Karate Kid, right? You have this kid who's living in New York, doesn't have a dad, he's living with a single mom, and they move to California. And he starts getting bullied, starts getting beat up by these guys, right? And so he's looking for a way, I need to learn how to defend myself. I need to learn how to, fight off these bullies. And he finds a mentor in Mr. Miyagi, right? And he says, okay, I'm going to teach you all of these things, and we're going to send you to this karate tournament. But what did Mr. Miyagi have him doing? Wax on, wax off, sand the floor, paint the fence, right? And Daniel's sitting here thinking, I've got a karate tournament coming up. I'm tired of getting into these fights. I need to learn karate. But he didn't understand that the process and where he was going, from point A to Z to Y back to B was actually all part of the journey, what made him successful. And so, at least in my own life, I can tell you that ended up being true. But I grew up pretty blue collar American kid, great Christian parents, Sunday school teachers. I had an older brother, younger sister. I played sports, really nothing cosmic. But I did start working for my dad when I was 13. Being family, you can bypass all those pesky labor laws and they can put you to work as much as they want to. And so I learned a lot of lessons from my dad: hard work, integrity, doing the right thing when nobody's looking. No matter what job you're given, do it to the best of your ability. And he just really hammered that home. And what's so funny, kind of my Mr. Miyagi moment, is so many things I learned working for my dad at a grocery store ended up helping me be successful later on in my special operations career. I had to learn how to deal with people from all walks of life. And I was eventually put in charge of people that were 20 and 30 years older than me. And so you have to learn how to navigate that terrain in a very unique way to get to an end goal and a common goal. I tell people there's no making it happen like a hurricane coming in and destroying your town and knocking out power and wrecking half the store. But you got people lined up needing groceries and needing a place to get stuff, and you just start firing up generators and making things happen. So I credit a lot of that to my father and some of the lessons that he taught me growing up. But in addition to that, in my childhood, I was very interested in military history. I was very interested in special operations, all of the wars. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, was very pivotal in that. He always had me watching the documentaries and the action and the war movies and stuff. But he was one of those guys that always liked to point out the inaccuracies of the war movies. And my wife's laughing at me because I'm that guy now. And I know it, I own it. But, he would always point out, oh, that wouldn't happen like this. Nobody would actually do that. And I point this out because I think on top of God leading, guiding, and directing us, he also has a tremendous sense of humor. And so I got to experience a lot of things that my grandfather said, never gonna happen. No one ever do that in combat, that I actually ended up doing. And so I thought it was pretty funny. So I went to college, out of high school, still working for dad. And I met my wife there at the store. She had worked there, left, and then came back. So now I'm married, done with college, still working for dad. And it was a great life, right? I had a good home. I loved working with my family. I liked what I was doing. I was fairly good at it. But man, this nagging just started inside of me that I was like, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to keep doing. And I couldn't understand why. And I think that's a pretty big marker in your life. If the outside world is telling you, hey man, you should be content. You got it made. You got all of these things. And the wisdom of the world is telling you that, but internally you're feeling like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. You may be missing out on what God has for you. And I know that if I wouldn't have acted and stepped out in the way that I did, I would have missed out on some pretty incredible things. So in the midst of going through this, we're flashing forward because I'm trying to make time here, but I'm about 28 years old now, managing my father's store. My son Hudson over here was about 3 years old, and it was just really getting to me. I was like, man, something's going on. And so at the time, Upward Pensacola was not a thing. I was not cheating on Upward by going to a different church. But the church we were at, I was very involved with the music program there on the worship team. And the pastor gave a message, and it was very similar to the Divine Providence messages that we just went through. And I can remember the pastor stopping. It was a pretty big crowd that day. And he said, man, I feel like God is telling me to say something. He said, if you feel like you're being called to do something, but you're systematically coming up with excuses and reasons why you can't do it, you very well may be standing in the way of a miracle. And it hit me because I felt like he getting chills right now because I knew in that moment that he was talking to me. And I had finally gotten to that point where I'm like, I do feel like I need to join the military. More specifically, I knew I wanted to do something big. So, kind of the first hurdle in all of this was I went home and I got down on my knees and I probably prayed one of the most earnest prayers, almost wrestling with God in a way of like, God, I should be happy. Everything should be good right now. I have nothing to be discontent about, but I am. And if I'm really supposed to go out and step out in faith and do this military thing, I need you to tell me. And so I had kind of brought up the whole military thing years past before Hudson was born. And let's just say it didn't go over well. Not real enthused from the wife department, which is important to have before you step out and are gone for up to 290 days out of the year. But right after that message, I prayed that prayer. And I think, I was talking to Kristen about this, it was either that same night or the next day that we were driving, and she brought up to me that if you feel like you need to step out and do it, you should do it. I'm like, okay, that's mile marker number one. I asked God to start showing me and start opening doors. That was number one. Number two, back up a little bit. I started to think, like, what am I going to do? What job would I want to go for? So I happened to be fortunate enough to know a buddy that became a Navy SEAL and a buddy that became a Green Beret. So of course, what do? I call them and start picking their brain. And they both gave me their sales pitch, their recruiter's pitch. And then at the very end, both of them who don't know each other said, honestly, if I had to do over again, I'd go and be one of these guys called a combat controller for the Air Force. And I said, okay, never really heard about that. And they're like, dude, they get to do everything. You get to jump, you get to dive, you get to control airplanes, you shoot, you learn everything. You go to the best schools, good bonuses, which wasn't a bad thing. And I was like, man, that does sound pretty cool. So I looked into it. First thing I saw was about 91% of the people that try out for it fail. So I'm like, okay, not off to a good start. But the more I read about the job, I really identified it. And I thought, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Within about 48 hours of hearing that message and praying that prayer, my wife has already given me confirmation about it. I kind of have a direction now that maybe this is where I'm supposed to be going. And I get an email from that same pastor. And he says, hey, can we meet up for breakfast, right? And so it was a fairly big church. As much as we all love our pastor and everything, he can't hang out with us one-on-one every day, all day. So it was a little out of the usual that he would reach out to me. So Kristen and I went and we sat down with him for breakfast. And he said, hey, I was praying and God told me to tell you that you have a big career change coming up and that you're supposed to go for it. And that not only will you make it, but you will be very successful at it. And so I looked at my wife and I was like, well, this is crazy because this is what I'm thinking about doing. And he basically said, go for it. And the way he said it, it wasn't like, hey, buddy, give it your best shot. I think you're going to make it. There was authority behind the way that he said it. And so you back up to it. Again, from the outside world, I was on a trajectory to take over my family's business. How in the heck would he know that I was going through that unless he was hearing from the Lord in that moment? So that was pretty powerful. Now we get on to the recruiter, all right? It's one of my favorite stories. So I was like, I'm gonna go drive to the Air Force recruiting office. I'm thinking like high school, where the recruiters are like chasing you down and won't leave you alone, right? Show up at the recruiting office, there's a sign on the door, by appointment only. I said, well, that's kind of weird. Call this number to make an appointment. I called, left messages, no one was calling me back. I'm like, what the heck? Do they want people in the Air Force or not? So finally, the recruiter calls me back and he says, hey, I'm Master Sergeant so-and-so. What can I help you with? I said, hey, I've been looking at the combat control program. I'm really interested. He laughed, just straight out laughed at me. He said, yeah, you and everybody else, buddy. He goes, I've already got 8 or 9 guys that are trying for it. I've never even had a guy out of my recruiting office make it through the program. Probably not going to happen, but okay, let's go through the preliminaries. How old are you? 28, getting ready to be 29. Sorry, age restriction, 28, you're too old. I said, well, I talked to a few buddies. They said they have waivers for it. He said, well, they used to have waivers for it. Now that would have to be an exception to policy letter. So you're going to have to get an 06 or a full bird colonel that is over all of the recruiting squadrons in this area to sign off on you when I've got 20 and 22-year-olds that are, fresh out of high school or collegiate athletes or whatever that are also wanting to go into this program. I said, okay, God, you told me I'm supposed to do this. So I said, well, is there anything we can do? He says, I tell you what, I'm going to try and send out an email to all of what they called SWORLs, which stood for Special Operations Recruiting Liaison. They were basically guys in the career field that were like talent scouts across the United States. They were going to high schools and colleges to try and bring guys into that program. And he sent out an email. I think I still have the email somewhere. It did not paint a very good picture of me, I'll put it that way. There wasn't a lot invested from that recruiter from an emotional standpoint, because it was like CC'd me with like 40 or 50 recipients. I think I stopped counting after 40. And he's like, hey guys, I got this 29-year-old father, husband who works at a grocery store who wants to become a combat controller. If one of you guys wants to reach out to him, great. I was like reading the email like, well, thanks, buddy. That really set me up for success. And lo and behold, shockingly, I didn't get a lot of emails and phone calls back from that, but I did get one phone call. And I'll never forget it because I was at work and I was sitting in the back room and I got a phone call. I was like, oh, I think this might be one of the guys. No preamble. I pick up the phone. I say, hello, this is Josh. This is Master Sergeant so-and-so. Please tell me why I need a 29-year-old grocery store worker that's already married with a kid into a program that I'm already having trouble getting guys through whenever they're 18 to 23 years old. That's a hard question to answer. And I stopped for a second and man, clear as a bell, I heard God say, tell him. So I did. I was like, he's gonna think I'm crazy. I told him the whole story I just told you. And he got quiet, he didn't laugh, he didn't say anything. He said, okay, I'm gonna help you. Turns out that guy went to a church in Gulf Breeze where I had played in the youth band there. Very devout Christian man, strong in his faith, and he believed me whenever I told him that that's what I was going through and why I felt like I needed to join. So now the recruiters are tolerating me, right? That's the best way I know how to put it. But man, one of the hardest things, because you got to swim, you got to run, you got to do all these other conditioning tests and things like that. And I thought, oh, I'm in pretty good shape. I can swim. No, there is a drastic difference in not drowning and being a good swimmer. I was good at not drowning, but I was struggling. And my wife, oh man, there's a story. I did the math in my head. I'm like, well, I'm going to go practice this 500-meter swim and see where I come in at. And I went out, into our little pool and was doing the laps. I made it like halfway through. I was exhausted. And I looked at her and she looked at the time and she was just like, no. So anyways, I've been training for a couple months now for this job because they basically said, you've got to pass this test for us to even look at you. So I go to one of the tests and there's this other guy there, older guy. Most of the guys were real young, big buff, Ken doll looking dudes. And there was another guy there. He's a little bit older too. And he was just being very humble and very quiet. And I'm like, there's something to this guy. So we go to get in the pool and do the swim. I'm about halfway through the swim, or not drowning and dying. It was rough in the early days. And I see this guy out of the corner of my eye get out of the pool. I'm like, well, that's weird. There's no way he could be done. Get out of the pool. He was done. He swam that 500-meter test in like 5 minutes and 30 seconds without breaking a sweat. And I barely made the time. I think I had like 3 seconds to spare that day. And so I walk over to him. I start talking to him. I said, man, what did you do? Who did you swim? You've got to have done something. He's like, well, I swam for FSU on a full ride scholarship. It's like, okay, so you're a swimmer? He's like, well, I might have backed up Michael Phelps at the Olympics. It's like, okay. So then we get out on the running track, and I quickly realized that old Aquaman is not so good at running. And so this idea formed in my head. I was like, well, if I'd write the running programs and he writes the swimming programs, we're going to be unstoppable. And so we did. So what did the Lord do, right? Like I'm making the swim times barely, but he provided for me an Olympic level swimming coach and a guy who ended up becoming my best friend. And I'll also add, ended up getting saved at Upward Church not long after the inception of the church. So I thought it was really cool. Am I good on time so far? Everybody good? Okay. All right. Still got to get to deployments, but we're going to make it. So now I'm actually doing pretty good in the program. The recruiters are paying attention to me. They can see that this iron sharpens iron approach of all the guys training together is working. So the recruiter calls me. He brings me into his office and he asks this question. It's so funny how military people are sometimes. They just get straight to the point. He goes, you work better under pressure or without pressure? I said, let's go with pressure. He goes, okay, I'm going to level with you. He said, we have never had a guy from our recruiting office make it through these programs. Furthermore, there's another set of standards on top of the minimums of what we ask you to make, and they call them these Ironman standards. And it's all these exercise science people and stuff like that that say, if you can score this high academically on tests, and you can swim, run, do all these things, that your chances of making it go from 1 in 10 to about a 92% success rate. And they're like, you're the closest guy we've ever had. I said, okay. And they say, so basically, there's got to be something in it for them. So it's like, if you can get this, I'm pretty sure we can get you this signature to let you get in. And so I said, okay, I've got a goal. And sure enough, on the next pass test, I did make those standards. My wife made me a plaque. It's really cool, hand-drawn. But yeah, I made those standards. And so I got my exception to policy letter from that full bird colonel. Not only did he do that, but I feel like it's important to mention that at the time, there were so many people wanting to go into that career field and try it, but so few people actually making it that there was a tremendous backlog. And so the average of how many of guys that they would send out to start that training was about on the rate of 1 to every 2 to 3 months. So I knew I'm like ninth in line at this point. So do the math real quick. It's like, okay, I might be collecting Social Security by the time they let me into this program. But that colonel, after I sat down with him, he put me first in line. And he said, we're going to send you. And so all of that is just getting into the military, all right? So I start the program, and I won't belabor the point, but the pipeline for combat control was very, very difficult. They weren't lying about that. Not only physically, but academically, a lot of guys we lost because they couldn't pass the test, because you basically have to become the equivalent of a Navy SEAL, but also an air traffic controller, and also understand JTACing, or joint terminal attack controllers, which is basically the guy on the battlefield that has the authority to call down munitions from your gunships, your bombers, your fighters, all of those things. On top of that, the original legacy mission was actually jumping in and taking over airfields, which is why you had to be an air traffic controller to be able to land all the follow-on aircraft. So it was very difficult, but I will say through the first 13 months, it wasn't anything more than what I was expecting or prepared for. But then we get to dive school, all right? And I know PC kind of told this story, but dive school was very important in that program, because it was kind of the crucible to say that if you got through that, the chances of you making it through were extremely high. You were pretty much going to graduate if you made it through that. And the reason is not because diving is difficult, but what it is they have figured out that the stress of having your hands and feet tied and thrown in a pool, or having oxygen taken away from you, physiologically is very similar to the stress of combat. And so it was kind of a precursor for them to be able to test you in a controlled environment to see, okay, will this guy be able to hold it together during combat? And that's the reason it was so difficult. And the big test is what they call the one-man competency drill. Somebody, I think on the Learning Channel, actually did a full show about it called Surviving the Cut. You can watch it. It terrified me, so I stopped watching it while I was going through dive school. But the first thing you have to do is a 2,000-meter fin. I did have an injury while I was at combat control school, which was like our version of Ranger school. But to be honest, I hid it. I didn't tell anybody about it because my wife had just given birth to our daughter. They normally don't let anybody go home from that school, but they let me fly home on a Friday. My daughter was born on a Saturday, and I headed back on Sunday, and I had 6 weeks left to go. And I said, dadgum, if I'm going to do one extra day of this or start over by telling someone I had an injury. So I hid it. And the problem happened whenever I got to dive school. Water temperature was 47 degrees. We had 78-degree rated wetsuits. It was miserable. And I just could not pass the 2,000-meter fin, something that had never been a problem for me before. And so I failed the first day. I failed the second day. And it's coming up the night before I take the third test. I called my parents. They brought me a new set of fins because I was thinking if I could just get more rigid fins, maybe I can get a little more speed. Didn't really sleep that night. So I woke up the next morning, and I was just already feeling defeated, and I was just praying nonstop. It's like, God, you called me this. If I don't pass, this could be it. And so the boats take us out to our launch point. We get in the water. I start swimming. Within the first minute, my fin strap breaks. I was already not making the time. Now I'm having to tread water with 1 foot and get an instructor's attention. Took a couple minutes so I could get on the back of the jet ski and fix my fin. So I started swimming again. I'm just praying the whole time, like, I can't swim any faster. I can't do anything more than what I'm doing or what I've trained to do at this point. Um, I remember getting to the rocks, which was our assembly point right near the dock, and my feet were so cold, and all the guys' feet were so cold just stepping up the rocks, they couldn't feel their feet, so everybody's falling and stumbling. And I was just looking down at the ground the whole time. I felt so defeated. And my team sergeant, who's the only guy allowed to wear a watch, looked at me. He's like, "Man, you waited until the last day to pass?" I said, "No way. There's no way I passed." He says, "Oh, yeah, you'd still pass." So I'm sitting there thinking, how? I didn't swim any faster. I know I didn't swim any faster. Plus, I got set behind a couple minutes by my fin strap breaking. And then I looked up. And so if I was standing on the dock right here, it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. That water was coming straight into the dock strong. It was supposed to be an outgoing tide. They wanted you to have to swim through a slight outgoing tide. And it was like the water and everything was just converging to that one point where we were supposed to swim. I started crying because I knew that there was nothing that I could have done in that moment to pass or to be any better. But God was like, "I got you." Probably a lot like, like Moses felt at the sea, like, we got all the way here. Are we gonna part this thing or what? Oh, do you guys ever wonder about that in the Bible? Like, what were they thinking at that moment? So I made it. I ended up going on to graduate. I've got a great story about the one-man competency drills, and again, why God has such a tremendous sense of humor. But I graduated, and I actually graduated top of the class, the John Chapman Award. John Chapman was a combat controller for SEAL Team 6 who died in the initial days of Afghanistan, charging a machine gun nest by himself to protect other teammates. And his widow actually comes to every graduation and gives away the John Chapman Award, which is voted on by your teammates and your instructors. And she hands it to you, which has got to be really hard to go through that every time. But yeah, by the grace of God, not by me, not by anything that I was able to do, I ended up getting that award from that class. So now flash forward, my first deployment after I reported to the active duty squadron was within a couple months, and I went to Afghanistan. I'm only telling this story now because I want to lighten it up a little bit, and I think it's hilarious. One of my favorite movies growing up was Delta Force with Chuck Norris. Does anybody remember that movie? And he had that really cool blacked out dirt bike with all the cool stuff on it. And every time my grandfather's like, nobody rides a dirt bike in combat. You've got no armor, you got none of this stuff. And so we did some training for this during the training pipeline. They called it rapids infills. And so the plane would land, the ramp would lower, and guys on dirt bikes would go out to secure the airfield, call in airstrikes, whatever you need to do. And I asked one of the guys, I was like, "Has anybody got to do this?" He's like, "No, I highly doubt you're ever gonna do this." So I'm a couple weeks into my first deployment in Afghanistan, and I get a call. One of the districts was under attack, and they were gonna send in a couple Army Special Forces teams and a couple of our guys to go help the Afghans. And my team leader comes into the team room, and he's like, "Hey guys, this district's under attack. We need to, I'm gonna take one guy with me. Apple, you're going with me. You're gonna take the dirt bike, and I'm gonna take the four-wheeler. And we're gonna land at this airfield, and we're gonna do a rapids infill, and then we gotta go set up all the infrared lights and communications and make sure nobody attacks the airfield while they're there." And I was like, "So you're telling me the first thing that I get to do on active duty, on a mission, is drive a blacked out dirt bike out of the back of this C-130? And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, why not?" So I pointed that out to my grandfather, that they weren't too far off with Chuck Norris. Then we get to my second deployment. Second deployment was tough. This was Iraq 2016. If you guys are familiar with what was going on at the time, ISIS just kind of did a rapid takeover of Iraq, pushed all the way to Kurdistan. And the US got involved, but probably not in a lot of the ways that the media might tell you. And so I was assigned to SEAL Team 1, and our job was to partner up with the Iraqi counterterrorism service guys and basically push ISIS all the way back to Mosul, and then we would have the final offensive in Mosul and hopefully clear out ISIS from that area. That was a tough deployment, man, because you hear about things and you think you're ready for things, and then you see them. First time I ever saw a guy clack off a suicide vest, just no hesitation, run towards troops and blow himself up. They had vehicle-borne IEDs that they would load down with explosives, put a driver in it. They would lock that driver in there with a padlock, send him toward the front lines to blow himself up and hopefully take out Iraqis and Americans. I had to take a lot of lives on that deployment. And it was necessary, but it still takes a toll on you. And I can remember one day, and this one was really hard. And I've never told a lot of these stories in a public forum before, but I feel like it's important, and I'll tell you why at the end. But there was this one day, we were doing an offensive, and there was a compound with some ISIS guys in there, and they had a lot of heavy weapons. They had already caused a few casualties, and my SEAL platoon leader's like, I'm sick of this, drop that building. Roger that. So I had some F-16s overhead, worked up the targeting package, and we dropped a 500-pound GPS-guided bomb on the compound. That bomb missed by 40 or 50 yards. It fell long, is what we call it. It went behind it. And I knew we had good targeting data. We knew that there was bad guys in that building. But while I'm talking to the pilot, trying to figure out what happened, out of the back of that building came running about 20 kids with some women trying to run and get away. That's hard, man, because you feel like you're signing up to help people, to free people, and then you realize that with one radio call, you almost just killed a bunch of kids. I mean, think about like our youth center back there. And it messed with me, man. And we were in the middle of it, and my platoon leader was like, hey, man, you get with it. I still need you. And so you kind of learn to compartmentalize and put those things behind you. But that was tough, and I knew it was affecting me. I made it through that deployment. I can remember getting in the car and looking at my wife and being like, I don't know how much longer I can do this, because this was tough, you know, all the things that you had to see. And on top of that, you know, one of the towns that we went into, I know I'm going long, but I feel like this is important to say. It was on the eastern edge of Mosul, and it was like an apocalypse town. Like we went in there, everybody was gone. Like kids' tricycles and bicycles laying in the road, bullet holes everywhere. And we were kind of exploring the town, and we went into the center of it, and it was actually a Christian district. There was a church there. Along the back wall was a painting of the Last Supper, and ISIS had gone in there and just trashed the church. And they had burned out all the faces of the apostles and Jesus on the wall. And it was dark. It was heavy. You could feel it, that there was an influence there. So we ended up taking up refuge in a compound there. And our interpreter, we figured out that it was the town, you know, mayor, leader, whatever, the house that we were staying at before we continued the offensive. And he found a journal of the town leader that basically talked about the day ISIS came into their town. And they forced all the families out into the town square. They put all the firstborn sons on their knees, and the leaders, the ISIS leaders, basically said, if you don't give us shelter, food, you know, harbor us, and give us some of your kids to help us, we're going to execute all the firstborn sons here. So you talk about hard. Now I'm starting to realize that probably a lot of those people that we are fighting on the way were forced into that. Can you imagine that type of evil? You know what I mean? So I came away from that deployment with some issues. I was having a hard time. Didn't manifest in any external way, but I knew it. And I didn't really talk to anybody about it, because most of the guys that I would talk to on the team, they were like, dude, you didn't do anything wrong. You were within the rules of engagement. That sounds great and all until it's you having to do some of those things, right? And so I was kind of struggling with it. And here's another divine moment, and it happened with PC. I don't even know if you remember this story. You do remember the story. I was working security in the old sanctuary. I was back by the sound booth walking by. And you guys know PC, right? He's always happy, go lucky, smiling. He had this serious look on his face. I'm like, PC is looking kind of intense right now. And he looked at me and he said, come here. And I went over to him. I'm like, yeah, what's up? I think the music was playing, so it was kind of loud. And I had my ear turned towards him instead of looking at him. He says, no, look at me. So I looked at him and he said, God told me to tell you that it is not your fault. that you did not put those people in that position. Evil men did, and you did what you had to do. You think PC knew what I was going through? I never told you that story, but he knew. And God was so invested in my own personal well-being that he reached out to somebody I trusted, a mentor, somebody that I was under that authority, and made sure to stop and tell me that it was okay. Man, you talk like crying like a baby. I probably got snot on his shirt. But man, this tremendous weight that I didn't know I had just fell off of me, and it was powerful. Another story, just real quick. 2018, Afghanistan. I was back working with Army Special Forces units, and we'd gotten a mission to go into this area, and I knew it was going to be my last mission before I went home, and something wasn't sticking right. Every time guys went in this area, there was casualties, American and Afghan. Something wasn't feeling real good about it. I started, making sure that all my life insurance stuff was up to date. I had left some my computer passwords with the teammates so that Kristen could get them for all of our pictures and things like that. And Kristen knew the night before that mission, we were talking on the phone, and she said, "Something big's coming up, isn't it?" I said, yeah. I couldn't tell her what we were doing, but she knew, and she goes, "Me and all the ladies have been praying about it." And I said, "Good. I need some Leslie. I need some Lenore behind us to make sure that nothing bad happens to us or any of our guys." And I can remember sitting at my computer the week leading up to it, and I can only call it divine inspiration. I had all these thoughts about, okay, well, if we do this, they're probably going to do this, and this might happen, and this is going to happen. And I was able to just kind of war game it out. And so when we did land and we did get attacked, first time in military history ever, everything went according to plan. And you military guys know exactly what I'm talking about, because these movies make it look like they're all slick and moving in and nobody's tripping or stumbling or anything like that. It ain't like that. I'll just tell you right now. They're very, very good at what they do. And we had some very talented guys I worked with, but it's not like that. But this one time, everybody that went in came out without a scratch. We took out 16 terrorists that night. It was so bad for them that in the morning we actually got reports that the district said that they had never seen hell like that before, and they all left, took up a caravan and left. So I'm going to sum this all up. There's so many more of these stories that I could tell and so many more things that I could say about this. But I want to kind of go through and do a little review here about all of the divine things that happened to lead me to this point. So first of all, why was I unsettled about what I was doing where I was? By the world standards, everything was great. How did my previous pastor know to reach out to me and say, "Hey, you got a big change coming up and you're supposed to go for it"? The very thing that I had prayed about, right, and was struggling with, he knew. We had never spoken about it. How did I get a recruiting liaison that happened to be a Christ follower, that happened to believe me whenever I told him that, like the Blues Brothers, "Hey, I'm on a mission from God. Like, I need some help." How did I get pushed to the front of the line and find favor with that commander to sign off on my paperwork? When I was struggling with the swim, how did I end up with a Olympic level swimming coach? Whenever I was failing and not making the standard for the fin at dive school, who changed the waters to make sure that I did pass? How did a precision guided munition, and they can fail, but there was nothing in this bomb that should have made it fall where it did. How did that miss that house full of kids and women that those guys were making stay in there? And more importantly, how did PC know that I was dealing with struggles, shame, and guilt for some of the things I'd done and seen on that deployment, right? So I hope that encourages you guys, because if there is anybody less likely to become a special operator in this world, I'd like to meet them, because I was working at a grocery store, man, just the most average dude ever. And I could go down all of the different awards and decorations and things like that, but God blessed me, and he gave me favor with everybody. I got promoted every time. Any award that you can think of, the medals, all of that stuff was poured out on me. And it was just tremendous. So many people can argue on God's existence and things like that. And as PC would say, oh, that's just coincidence. But man, when you know better, you know better. And there's nobody going to convince me any different that I wasn't part of something really cool. And just so humbled by it all that God stuck with me, elevated me to those positions, allowed me to experience those things. It was just a very, very cool and unique journey. Got to thank my wife and my son, my daughter, and they stuck through in some very, very hard times, and they deserve a lot of credit for dealing with all that. I know I wasn't always there, but I appreciate you guys. Um, yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything, hit me up offline. Be happy to share it with you. And PC, thanks for the opportunity to speak. God bless you guys.